I'm Sarah, here with Mel.
Hi.
Today I'm really excited to be approaching a topic that we don't necessarily talk about a lot, which is sexual abuse and protecting our children from sexual abuse. It's something that maybe we think of when our children start going on camp or out of the home a little bit more, or sleepovers, but there's definitely things that we can implement from a younger age and conversations that we can start having. So I'm really excited to be talking to Sandra Ifrah, who is a child and adolescent psychologist from sandraifrah.com.au. Welcome, Sandra. It's lovely to have you with us today. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Sarah and Mel, for having me and for being such wonderful advocates of body safety and really empowering parents to educate kids about body safety and keeping safe. My experience commenced several years ago when I commenced working at the Centre Against Sexual Assault with victim survivors of sexual assault. And, you know, these little kids were coming and just constantly saying and repeating to me that they just didn't know that what was happening to them wasn't normal. And that sort of sparked something in me, and I'm thinking, how can that be? How can children not know that, you know, what is happening to them is not normal, and how can we get that into the public knowledge to educate kids? And through that process I discovered that parents just don't know. They don't know how to approach the topic. It's not something that's widely spoken about. So it's sort of like I took this as a mission to be out there, to open lines of conversations around this topic and really help parents find the language to communicate to children about this. And sort of that's where my passion started, and it's been a journey ever since, and I can really see that it is becoming more of a normative topic to talk about, and that more people are on board with educating parents, which is fantastic.
I'd love to start off, Sandra, just by asking you, and this is probably a really hard question to answer because so much around sexual abuse goes unreported, but are there any stats out there around children and sexual abuse that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. When I conduct the workshops, I really want parents to understand that, yep, statistics is good to know. However, not to put too much emphasis on that because, you know, our children are 100%. So when we talk about statistics, someone's child is going to fall within those percentages. But, you know, globally we are looking at around 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males are reported to have experienced some sort of sexual assault incident between the ages of 0 and 18. And that includes the whole spectrum of sexual assault, so not necessarily only physical, but it can be verbal, and so on. But what's really interesting in the statistics and what I sort of focus on with parents is the vulnerability of the younger ages. And the stats tell us that between, you know, 65 to 70% of sexual assault victims fall under the age of 10. And that's not really surprising to us because they're more vulnerable, yes. And so they need more protection, and that's where the education really comes in. Because once they go past that age, they're more exposed to the outside world and media and internet, yes. So they gain that extra knowledge then. But with the younger ones, sort of it's our responsibility as adults yes. to educate them, and that statistic was quite enlightening to me.
Yeah, it's not scary, but it's shocking. And I guess when we think of sexual abuse with our children or family members, we think of the predator, the unknown person at the park, or, you know, the person down the street that we don't necessarily know, or the scary person that we've spotted in the neighbourhood. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, absolutely. I think it's easier for parents and for carers to focus on the stranger danger, yes. Because you're sort of externalising it. You don't know the person, and it's easiest to sort of explain things in that context. But again, coming back to statistics, the research tells us that over 90% of alleged perpetrators are actually known to the child. So really the focus needs to be across the board. Yeah. So when we are educating, we're not distinguishing between known, unknown, we're talking across the board. It's not females, it's not males, it's not adults, it's not adolescents, it's not children, it's really across the board, because in the past few years we have noticed an increase as well in under 18s as alleged offenders as well. You know, the internet has come in, and you know, these young people are being exposed to things that they're developmentally just not ready to see. And they're experimenting, and we really need to be aware of that as well. So when we are educating, it's just talking in general terms about what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah. And I think I've interviewed you once before, and the thing that actually shocked me the most when we spoke last time was you mentioned that people can come into the family, they don't necessarily just groom the child, they groom, and you mentioned the word grooming the parents and the family, which really surprised me and shocked me. Can you tell us a little bit about that and that process so that we have, a better understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my talk, I actually go through different stages of grooming in quite depth, because I think that's where the parent sort of power comes in, to be able to notice that. And when I talk to parents about educating kids, it's just one element of safety and body safety, and the parents ultimately have the responsibility to protect children. Yes. What we're trying to do is educate kids to help us help them. Yes. But it's really the parents and adults around the child's responsibility. So grooming is really a way for us to be able to pick up and detect when another adult possibly shows special interest in our child, and they have to groom the parent as well, because part of sexual abuse is access. They have to have access to the child, and therefore they have to gain the trust of the parent, and that's part of grooming. So it's really finding a need that the child has, that these alleged offenders can sort of come in and fill that gap, whether it's attention, whether it's affection, whether it's with gifts, and then grooming the parents in that process to gain that trust and allow the adult to have access to their child without any suspicions.
And I struggle to think of what that looks like. So what does that actually... Can you give us an example? I know it's really hard, but what does it look like if you are a parent?
Look, if it's a family member or someone that you know, it's harder to detect, because you sort of sometimes expect those things to happen anyway. But really, a lot of the time, in retrospect, what parents have said is that the signs were always there and they didn't pick it up. Because you know that inner sort of voice, they tend to shut it down really quickly, absolutely, and dismiss it and try and justify, it's because they love the child, or it's because they're trying to help me, and they are offering to take the child places, they're offering to babysit, they're offering because they want to help, and that's why we see single mums statistically are more vulnerable, because we have that adult coming in and sort of helping them and trying to be there for them with having ulterior motives. So, just the subtle things that, listening sort of to that inner voice of, that doesn't seem quite right, but I'm not sure what that really is.
And so we talk about the grooming of the child, the grooming of the family and the parents, and what to look out for as parents. But what are the conversations that we do have with our children about appropriate, inappropriate, safe body parts? And at what age do we start those conversations? And I guess what conversations are relevant for what age group?
And particularly, I think a big question that does come up is when a child chooses not to kiss a family member or chooses not to kiss, because we very much go, kiss, kiss
in a cuddle.
And yet they might choose not to. So I've heard conversations in the schoolyard where do you draw the line of go and kiss your grandmother to no, you can actually make the choice yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes it might come down to changing social norms, right? And saying, what's been acceptable till now is now not acceptable, and I'm I'm going to sort of change and enforce new rules and allow my child to decide how they want to show affection, with other family members, with friends. And, it's not about rude or unrude, it's just about a choice. And so we need to really change the way that we think and approach the topic to sort of encourage our child to feel comfortable with that as well. And that can really start from as young as they can sort of choose and say no, and that's quite young. And with the age thing, a lot of parents really want to know, when can we start? And starting from basics, correct terminology for body parts, that's so important for a number of reasons. And the two main ones I talk to parents about is, first thing, language. We need to give them the language. Yes. We've had a lot of situations where children have disclosed and use really vague terminology, and carers and other people around them just didn't know what they were talking about and dismissed it. Yep. So that's the first reason. The second reason is we really want to open lines of communication around sex and sexuality and make that topic comfortable in our house. And what message do we send our kids when we use nicknames for those body parts? We're saying we're uncomfortable. And that's why we need to use nicknames. We don't want to talk about the real thing. We don't want to... And, sometimes the non-verbal messages we send our kids are just as important, if not more so, than what we actually communicate to them. Okay. And when we are educating kids, we really want to use everyday situations to promote conversation around body safety.
Okay. Could you give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. The most sort of natural thing that comes to mind is bath time.
Yes.
They're already naked, they're in the bath, it's normal for them to sort of have a curiosity about touching and feeling, and if they have siblings, they're interested, if it's different, if it's the same. Perfect situation to normalise it. But then, that's not okay because that's theirs and we don't touch theirs, and that's yours, you can touch yours. So really setting sort of the boundaries around appropriate and inappropriate touch. Play. Little kids love pretend play, and, I always encourage, get anatomically correct dolls. Because again, it's conversation, it's there. What is that? What does that do? So again, promoting conversations through play. So really using everyday sort of situations to bring up the topic. Just like we would anything else, don't hit, don't bite, don't swear, don't use your word. You just incorporate body safety into that language and part of educating our kids.
And last time I spoke to you, you referred to, I believe it was you referred to the bathers. So when we're talking to our children about safe, areas that are appropriate and not appropriate, and you referred to bathers, is that correct?
So just maybe, with the little kids trying to explain what's private and how do we know what private is. And so it's easy for them to associate private with bathers because those are the areas that are sort of always covered no matter where you are. Even at the beach or the pool, we tend to have the bathers covering. So, just trying to use things that they already know and are aware of to explain about privacy and body safety.
And what about then as our children get older? So that's quite obviously young conversations with our children when they're in the bath together, etc. When they're at a primary school level, what sort of conversations are we having to them then around being safe, but also around the courage to say no, or realising if they are in a situation that is uncomfortable for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we sort of start from basics, we've already got the groundwork, right? We already have that communication, that trust that they can come and tell us, they can come and talk to us, and then building from then on. So then we have, play dates. So slowly they're starting to move away from the parent naturally, and then we're using those opportunities again to educate them. So play dates, what happens when you're feeling uncomfortable? What does that look like? And I talk a lot about, in my workshops quite in depth about how we teach kids to tune into their intuition and know that even though they don't exactly know what's happening to them, they are feeling uncomfortable in that situation. And then we talk about a plan. What do we do when you are feeling those feelings? Who else can you trust around you at the time if I'm not accessible to reach out to in the school setting, or when they're away in camps, or so having those conversations before they go.
Yes. So they're aware of what to
Absolutely.
say or do if they find themselves.
Yeah.
Because I actually think bringing both the grooming and the child awareness, particularly if you've got a child that is a people pleaser. And what I mean by that is they're very well mannered. Other kids would probably go, what are you doing? Go away. But I'm talking about the people pleaser who wants to do right and has good manners. And so when an adult is grooming them, to me, they're probably more susceptible because they're trying to do the right thing. And there's this adult, and when we were little, we looked up to adults, didn't we? And when anything they said,
absolutely.
So how do you deal with a child like that?
And that's where the vulnerability again comes into. And alleged perpetrators and predators would sort of look for those things because that will more likely keep the secret going. And that's another really important element to educate kids about, what's an okay secret to keep, what's not an okay secret to keep. But as parents, we really have to give our children permission. We have to give them permission to say no, that's not okay, and then let them know that we're going to back them up.
Yes.
Because a lot of the messages we give kids is listen to your elders, listen to what your teacher say, do what she says. And we need to really change the language that we use, and instead of just, using general terms about just listen to what they want you to do, maybe we need to say, listen when she asks you to stop talking to your friends. So being a bit more specific rather than saying it, listen to everything they say and do whatever they tell you to do, and just being more Absolutely. And if you're not feeling comfortable, I'm going to be there and I'm going to believe you and then I'm going to support you. So those messages are really important across the board.
And secrets is something that comes into it, isn't it? A lot, I assume. And what isn't a good secret and what is a bad secret? Is that how you refer to it? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We refer to them more so as okay and not okay secrets, because the term good and bad can be quite subjective, and what's good to you and what's bad to you. And so we tend to go with what's okay and what's not okay. And I tell parents, if you are struggling to find sort of the words or to explain things, there are fantastic books out there, fantastic resources that you can purchase and sit with your kids. They're interactive, and they will sort of help you get started, and then you can build on that. But with okay and not okay secrets is going back to basics. First of all, if you're unsure, then it's not okay and you come to me. If you're not sure, you come to me regardless, and we can work out together if it's okay or not okay. And with the older, kids, sort of mid to late primary, it starts being, dibber-dobber and, all those, I don't want to tell the secret, I don't want to tell anyone because I'm going to be dobbing on them. But it's with that parent, that's okay. Make them feel comfortable that it's okay to talk to you about it, and then you can decide together if it's okay or not okay to keep.
And so, as we've obviously covered, and it's a minefield of questions, and you do a range of presentations at schools, don't you, to parents mainly? Not to children at all?
No, not to children, mainly to parents. And I think, once parents have that knowledge, they can take it on and build on it, and really important for education to start at home. It's great to have support at school, and it's great that schools are on board, but really it's a continuation of the education. It doesn't start and stop at a certain place. And when you educate parents, then they feel empowered to sort of take that on board and keep that going developmentally where their child is at. And if they haven't started, it's never too late. They can still, and that's really important to sort of send that message.
So, what I was going to ask is, when do you change, like we're talking about body parts as young children, and we start that early, but when do you actually start talking to your child and going, actually, there are people out there that are not kind and they do touch parts that they shouldn't on you? When do you have that conversation that they can actually cope with that information.
Yes.
And also connect with it and go, yeah, no, I don't.
They know straight away.
Yeah. What age would you look at for that?
I mean, it's hard to specify an age because different kids develop obviously differently. But it comes back to why we educate parents, because parents know their children.
Yes.
And slowly when you have a child, you sort of know what they naturally get exposed to.
Yeah.
And if something comes on the radio about it, opportunity to say something.
So
something comes on the news. Yeah, so, you know, sort of mid to late primary, they already start exposing to that because they get that stranger danger. And, you know, and you start talking about that. So you can absolutely say, you know, we can't sort of sugarcoat it for the kids. We need to say it what it is. And then for the later ages, I even say, you know, early adolescence, use correct terminology for what it really is, sexual abuse and assault, you know, and then consent comes into it. And so it's really, you need to take it as far as it needs to go.
Yeah. Because I know just with Luca, my conversation came from being on Minecraft, but on a multi-server.
Yes.
And he couldn't understand why I was fearful, and that brought it to attention. And I said to him, you need to understand there are people out there that are grooming you, and I need to. I'm your protector, and I need to protect you. So I need to know what's coming in and what's going out. So that was the instance that came to me. Not necessarily a picture or whatever. It was actually through the internet and gaming. So it would definitely come through many different.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that comes to the fact that the world opens up to them through the internet, and they are just not developmentally ready to understand cause and effect and predict sort of some of the ramifications of what they're putting out there in space. And that's why, you know, cyber safety is really part of body safety, really, but just for the older, once they get exposed to sort of the internet. And there's wonderful YouTube clips to really demonstrate some of that, and, you know, use visual aids to show kids what it can potentially look like when you're not careful on the internet. And what predators can potentially look like, and the dynamic between that and the grooming. And I give parents, you know, some of those sites to go in and
we'll actually
pop some links.
We'll grab a lot of links and resources from
Fantastic,
you and put
absolutely.
that into our social media. Now, was there
if parents are looking for more information, can they hop on? Do you have a lot on your website, or where do you direct them generally if they're looking for more information?
The Centre Against Sexual Assault, especially the Southeast, has wonderful resources, aids and links, and so I really direct parents there because I think they cater for a wider sort of population, and it's not, you know, necessarily just for kids. We know that parents who were victim survivors themselves sort of extra struggle, and they've got fantastic resources there as well.
Okay, great.
Okay. And is there? Did you have something else?
No.
You wanted to ask? Is there anything else that I guess we haven't covered or haven't asked that you think is important for parents who are watching or to know, or parents or carers, I should say?
Sure. I really want to highlight just one element that I did touch on a little bit about really taking ownership of this topic, because I see a lot of parents sort of, oh, the school will do it and the kinder will do it and other organisations will come in, but this is really important to start at home. And not only for the continuity of it, because school is in and out, really. It's, you know, that you get it in grade 5 or whatever, and that's it. But, you know, opening that line of communication, that's what's going to keep it going. And, you know, being comfortable, and if you're not, then that's more of a reason to do it. You know, using those words, that language, and kids are going to feel comfortable. And they're going to get much more accurate information, because if they're curious, they're going to go to their friends, they're going to go to the internet, they are going to find information that is incorrect, partial information, and what better way of getting it from the parent who's going to explain. It's not just the mechanics of it, it's the whole lot of things. And
Yeah.
So I can, if I can really stress something, is take ownership of it, start at home, and don't rely on anyone else to educate your kids.
And it comes back to the parent being the advocate again,
Well,
doesn't it? Isn't there such a strong theme with that, isn't
well,
it?
it's through everything, isn't it, when you're raising children?
That's right.
And because I think and it just popped into my mind, but last time I think we also spoke about school camp and sporting clubs and all the other areas where your children go, to be the parent that is there asking questions. So what's your policy with this, and what do you do with that? And to sporting clubs, what is your policy on children being alone with adults on camps or what have you?
Yes. So bring proactive.
Yes.
Bring proactive in finding out, you know, what are the policies and what do you do in those situations, who's going to be around, who can my children go to if they are feeling uncomfortable. But also brings a really, really, another important point is being curious about your own children and being sort of like an investigator to parents, and asking questions. You know, when they come back from play dates, when they come back from sleepovers, you know, I always tell parents to try and be neutral, but at the same time, kids are going to tell you things that they wouldn't necessarily think much about, but to you as a parent, it might sort of trigger something and switch something. So I usually, you know, ask my kids, what was mum doing when you were playing? What was dad doing when you were playing? At sleepovers, where were you sleeping? Who was sleeping in the room with you? Who else was at home? So, you know, but just as a general, and if you make that the norm, they're not going to think that you're interrogating or questioning. It's just going to be part of your normal routine. You come back, I want to know. You're not with me. I need to know what's happening. And again, from the get-go, get that sort of routine happening.
Yes.
Yeah. And allow yourself to do it again.
Actually, just before we do finish up, I'm a parent, are there any telltale signs you can see in a child that you go, that something's not right there? Now, I know there's conversation, but is there anything else that you can be looking...
Something's happening.
Something's not right. That because the child might have possibly been abused.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing necessarily that you can say aside from obviously physical elements around the private parts and the genitals that might lead more so to the questioning of sexual abuse, which very rarely happens, by the way, and that's why we don't solely focus on that. But other symptoms might be indicators of other things. But what I do tell parents is that if you are noticing something out of the norm for your child, question that as well. Because what we normally tend to ask, okay, what's happening at school? What's happening with friendships? Is anyone bullying you? Is anyone hurting you? But no one is specifically asking, is anyone touching you inappropriately? Include that in your line of investigation as a possible cause for what's happening for your child. But really something out of the norm needs investigating. You know, whether it's bed waiting, if the child has been toilet trained for a while, clinginess all of a sudden when the child didn't have any separation anxiety. So just including that as part of your question.
And something did just come up to me. So I know this is actually quite controversial in a parent group. You have a child come over and you go, they're not playing appropriate, same age, not playing appropriately with your child, but alarm bells are ringing with you. How, as a parent, do you handle that?
Yes. Look, at the end of the day, I think the other parent obviously needs to know what you're observing and give them that opportunity to sort of clarify things, or even give them the opportunity to educate that child about appropriate or inappropriate. But that's another good example of using certain situations to then intervene and teach your child how to manage those circumstances when they are in a situation that someone else is being inappropriate. And we are getting a lot of calls from schools saying that incidents between children have happened in the school setting, whether it's same age, whether it's a bit older kids with the younger kids, and schools are at a loss to really know how to handle those situations, absolutely. But that just highlights the need to educate our kids, because it's not just adults, it could be in the school setting, and you can't prevent them from going to school, and you need to empower them to be able to sort of tell you what's going on and handle those situations when you're not there. So absolutely, we are seeing a lot of other kids experimenting with same age in the school setting, or play dates. So it's not uncommon.
No, well, I know of an example last year, but because the way the child was educated, she called it on them, on the school. She was only in prep. Called it on the school and went straight home and to her mum and said, this is what happened. But because they've had these open conversations, she was able to define, that's not okay.
And then there's early intervention. You intervene a lot earlier, and then the situation won't escalate.
Well, so it's a big topic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Big topic.
So if anyone is watching and they do want more information, they can go to Sandra Ifrah, ifrah.com.au. We'll pop all of the links on our social media as well. Thank you so much for coming along and joining us and sharing your knowledge today.
Absolutely.
And we'll tune in next week for Humankind, raising good humans. Thank you.
Bye.